Hello, everybody. This is Frank with South Florida Conservative News. This is a special short report. As you know, the battle is raging on between the socialists and the forces of the United States government in Los Angeles. It is also raging on the internet and TikTok and Instagram and things like that. And one of the more interesting ones that we have, being from South Florida, is the new videos trying to tear the Cuban voting bloc away from the Republicans with stories of insane deportations and things of that nature, when it's really not true. And we'll explain it to you in a minute, because those of you who aren't familiar with what goes on around the Miami area and into Cuba, you'll be pleasantly surprised. So the videos will be like, my wife's in Cuba and I don't know if she's going to be able to come here, things like that. So we wrote this all out so it makes sense to you. And if there's any questions, feel free to comment with us. Any of you fake immigration attorneys out there, feel free to say it's not true, but that's your prerogative to rob the illiterate peasants of the third world as much as you'd like. So here we're going to go and explain what goes on. This is usually, I'll say, the newish ones after the Mariel boat lift. Okay. As you know, we had a number of significant Cuban events, the revolution and the Mariel boat lift being the two big ones, the Peter Pan flights as well. And then ever since then, most of the time, and then we had wet foot, dry foot, which allowed you, once you were on land, to stay here, which was done in by President Obama, of all people, right? Who actually got rid of a lot more people than President Trump did, but he was playing for the other team, so we won't even get into that. So you're going to see these things where these older guys or women are like, oh, I got to do this and that, and I'm going to be deported, or I can't get back into the country. Well, as of the other day, there was a flight restriction that stopped you pretty much from coming in from Cuba in general. Number of reasons for that. One of the reasons, which they don't discuss anymore when they should, is because the Cuban government's intelligence agency is top notch. And in fact, in most cases, is better on the ground than our CIA. And we've known that for quite some time. And they float back and forth from Cuba to the United States whenever they wish. And they can get up to hijinks while they're here. The formalities between the United States and Cuba are degraded to such a level that there's a regular flight. I think it's Gulfstream, and I believe that Spirit actually gets involved once in a while. So you can fly directly into Havana from Miami. So it was so much for it's a secret to get in and out of the country, right? Not really. And then what we'll have is the issue of asylum. Most people that come here from Cuba are refugees from the evil communist empire. And this is for you, because this is the story that people don't get. And I'm going to just read it to you so you understand. When you see these people, especially when they say my wife is in the other country and she can't get in or get back, this is why. Okay. So here we go. Ready? So if someone arrives in the United States from Cuba and seeks political asylum, they are making a legal claim that their life or freedom is at risk if they return home to Cuba. Under U.S. immigration law, particularly the Immigration and Nationality Act, an asylum applicant must establish a well-founded fear of persecution based on political opinion, race, religion, nationality, or membership in a particular social group. The essence of an asylum claim is that the applicant faces genuine danger from their own government, meaning the Cuban government, or groups the government cannot or will not control. Their intelligence forces, street gangs, that kind of thing you also see in Venezuela. Trinidad was part of it. There's also a bunch of thugs that run through Caracas and stomp your ass out. Thus, when a Cuban asylum seeker travels frequently to Cuba and back, or maintains property there, also true, especially if they are supported by U.S. government provided welfare or assistance, which does happen, it directly undermines the credibility of their claim. So what we're saying is you came here saying that you were going to be killed by the Cuban government because you are on the shit list. Once you got yourself straightened out as far as to be able to get housing, get food, get this, get that, in a lot of cases get paid, you decide to go back and forth to Cuba every couple of weeks and visit your family. Or I make money in the United States and I smuggle it back to Cuba to give to my family. This is condoned by the Cuban government because they need the inflow of US dollars. When Americans, real Americans, not anybody related to the Cuban Americans, are to go there, they usually are caught up at the airport and are forced to exchange US dollars for Cuban dollars at the rate of 1 to 1, which is ridiculous, but that's what you have to do. Whereas the Cubans, they usually let them slide because they know that money is going to go into the black market economy, which is what keeps the pressure lid from blowing off in Havana. If the money wasn't there and the people couldn't buy a ham sandwich once in a while, it would go south quickly. All right. So where were we on this one? All right. So frequent visits to Cuba indicate to immigration officials that the individual may not truly fear persecution or harm from Cuban authorities. Maintaining property or other assets in Cuba, particularly when funded by public benefits, meaning welfare, or you're getting food stamps, welfare, whatever, received in the United States, similarly weakens the legal argument that returning to Cuba would place the individual's life at risk. So I'm getting money from welfare, or what often happens in town is I am dancing in an exotic club and making lots of money, and then I go home every 2 months or so and I have it keistered and I give it to my whoever, my abuela, my tia, whoever, and now they're all happy, right? Once again, going back and forth. The girls that were caught doing this before used to go Cuba to Mexico, Mexico into the United States, and then over. Then they got lazy and started taking the Miami flight. That's not everybody. So don't say it's everybody, but the fact of the matter is the majority of these stories are going to come out of a situation very similar to the one that I'm explaining to you now. So back to this. So when funded by public benefits received in the US, similarly weakens the legal argument that returning to Cuba would place the individual's life at risk. Under Immigration and Naturalization Acts, asylum status can indeed be revoked if the government determines the individual no longer has a valid fear of persecution, or if the original claim is found to be fraudulent, which it is these days a lot. 9 times out of 10, I can't say 9 times out of 10. I'll say 7 times out of 10, yeah, because what the Cubans are doing is they want to get rid of the people. They don't want them in the country. The less people in there, the easier it is for the communists to keep charge of the place. Okay, so in summary, seeking asylum legally requires clear evidence of genuine fear and danger. Actions that contradict this claim, such as frequent travel to Cuba or maintaining assets there or bringing money into the country or any other number of other bullshit things. When I see people that I know, and I can't say where they are, but they're here in Broward County, a young man takes various Cuban youth back to Havana for a party weekend. A number of reggaeton videos are shot in Havana in one section. They have it cleaned up. It doesn't look so decayed. They shoot a lot of reggaeton videos because it's money, and they can supply pretty girls because they have pretty girls, supposedly. They're around there somewhere. He takes the American or Americanized Cubans back home, have some drinks, have some this, have some that, run around, act like assholes. This happens too. So basically, the Cuban American issue has been abused pretty hard over the years. Now that it's starting to snap back into reality, once again, people don't like when we have to follow the rules. Okay. And as I've shown you here, this is what's going on. And this can lead to the immigration authorities questioning the validity of your asylum claim. And they could ultimately result in a revocation of asylum status and potential deportation. So they brought it upon themselves in a lot of these cases. A couple of people that have been thrown out of the country, I'd have to get their names. There's a fellow named Frank Di Verona, who was a member of the assault brigade at Bay of Pigs. Mr. Verona will tell you the names of some of the spies that we've gotten a hold of here. And we quietly ship their asses back to Cuba instead of probably stepping into them as we should. He's online. You can look him up. He does videos. Unfortunately, most of them are in Spanish, but he speaks English and he answers most questions. He's written a couple of books, mostly about Bay of Pigs and also about issues around the Cuban American experience in Miami. So that's what we have here. So when you see these videos, they're mostly bullshit. And honestly, a few of them, I have to have a guy listen to them again. We don't even think one or two of the guys are actually Cubans because they realize that the Americans do not know the nuances of the language enough to know if the guy is a Cuban or not. So what they'll do is they'll have him talk in the background and then put the words across the screen. Okay. Now, if you're a Spanish speaker and you're watching this, you'll understand what I'm talking about. They don't all sound the same. Just like the United States, we have regional accents, and also we have different accents from the people of England and Scotland and Ireland and Canada and Australia. So there's also that in there. But the key goal of that series of videos is to try to tear the Cuban voter away from voting for Donald Trump or from voting Republican in the midterm election. Everything is the midterm election here. So that's about it for that one. And we'll have some bigger things going on as we get the day progressing. So any other questions, feel free to put them in the comments section. We have very good, well, I'll talk about that later. So that's about it. See you later on. Bye.